The warning signs were there for anyone paying close attention. Week after week, the Indiana Fever were quietly putting together the kind of performances that don't always make national headlines, but send a very clear message to every team in the league. And then came the Toronto Tempo. What unfolded on the hardwood that night was not simply a basketball game. It was a declaration. A full-throated, chest-out statement that the Indiana Fever have arrived, and they are not here to participate. They are here to dominate. The final score told the story plainly enough.
It looks like the Indiana Fever had to go and hire a new shout-out specialist, a shout-out coordinator, because Stephanie White has failed to give Caitlin Clark the proper props and respect for her performances. It probably tastes like vinegar in your mouth you having to talk about Caitlin.
A commanding 22-point blowout victory powered by a staggering 113-point offensive output in just 40 minutes of regulation basketball. But the numbers, as impressive as they are, barely scratch the surface of what actually happened inside that arena. Welcome back to WNBA Updates. Let's break down every single layer of this remarkable performance. For weeks, the national conversation around the Indiana Fever has been filled with doubt. Critics questioned whether the locker room chemistry was real or manufactured for the cameras. Analysts wondered aloud whether this...
Now, we know Stephanie White has continually dropped the ball and embarrassed Caitlin Clark in post-game situations, kind of refusing to shout her out and things like that. But it looks like they took that duty off of Stephanie White's hands.
Roster was simply a collection of high-profile individual talents who would eventually buckle under the pressure of expectations. The doubters suggested that the moment things got tough, the cracks would show and the foundation would crumble. The Toronto Tempo walked into that arena carrying their own motivation. Still stinging from the controversial ejection of Isabelle Harrison in their previous matchup, they were desperate to reclaim momentum and remind the league that they belong in the conversation. They came prepared with a defensive game plan. They came with energy and urgency. They came ready to compete. None of it mattered. Within minutes, it became clear that the Tempo had walked into something they were completely unprepared for. The Fever came out with a level of cohesion, confidence, and controlled aggression that silenced every single critic who ever questioned this team's ability to play together. The chemistry that so many people called a work in...
All right, so you see, where'd he come from? They said they went and found this dude on Indeed somewhere. This is crazy. No disrespect, brother. I don't know your name, man. Look, bro, it's almost like you just came from under the ring like the Undertaker. the screen.
Progress. It is no longer in progress. It is fully operational, sharply refined, and increasingly dangerous. Let's be direct about what Caitlin Clark did against the Toronto Tempo, because it deserves every bit of the attention it is going to receive. This was not just a good game. This was an MVP-level masterclass, the kind of complete, all-encompassing performance that defines careers and shifts narratives. She finished the night with a massive double-double, combining a significant...
Okay, he says CC moved up to second for the assist. At least he said it. Good job on your first day on the gig. You did all right.
Significant scoring total with a jaw-dropping double-digit assist figure that had the entire building buzzing. But the raw statistics don't fully capture the way she controlled every single possession, every defensive rotation, every decision Toronto tried to make on the floor. Here is what separates Clark from virtually everyone else in the league right now. She is not just a scorer who happens to pass, and she is not just a passer who can occasionally score. She is both threats simultaneously, at an elite level, operating at the exact same time. That combination is virtually impossible to defend. The Tempo tried everything. They brought physical double teams the moment she caught the basketball. They trapped her the instant she crossed half court. They threw complicated rotations at her and dared her teammates to beat them. None of it worked. Because when Clark saw the double team coming, she didn't panic, she smiled. She found Aaliyah Boston cutting...
She does a good job of forcing the action in the ball screen and really creates 2-on-1 opportunities. And so then she does a good job. I thought
it probably tastes like vinegar in your mouth, you having to talk about Caitlin. You had the opportunity with the first question. They had to like pin you in a corner to get you to talk about it. This probably tastes like vinegar to you.
To the rim and delivered a pinpoint pass directly into her shooting pocket for an easy layup. When the tempo adjusted and tried to protect the paint, Clark stepped back behind the logo and knocked down a deep three-pointer that had defenders shaking their heads. The most remarkable aspect of her performance, beyond the raw production, was how effortlessly she operated in the half-court. This is not the same player who was frantically adjusting to the speed of the professional game as a rookie. The professional game has now slowed down for Caitlin Clark. She is reading defensive rotations before they develop, anticipating where the opening will appear 2 or 3 passes before it actually does, and delivering the basketball with the timing and precision of a player who has been running this offense for a decade. She was manipulating defenders with her eyes alone. No-look passes in heavy traffic. Thread the needle feeds through closing windows. She was playing chess while the tempo was still trying to figure out the checkerboard. When your point guard is personally responsible for a massive chunk of your team's total offensive output, combining her own scoring with a double-digit assist total, you are watching something genuinely special unfold in real time. The impact of that kind of performance on an opposing defense is devastating and almost impossible to overstate. If your opponent is only scoring, your defensive strategy is straightforward. Double-team them and force someone else to beat you. But when Clark is distributing at that level, every single Fever player on the floor becomes a legitimate scoring threat. The tempo defenders were visibly hesitating on every possession, caught between contesting the three-pointer and protecting the paint, and Clark was punishing them for every moment of indecision. This is what a floor general looks like at full power. The MVP conversation in this league just got significantly interesting. You absolutely cannot discuss this dominant victory without spending significant time on the player who has quietly become one of the most important pieces of this Indiana Fever puzzle. Sophie Cunningham was absolutely unconscious against the Toronto tempo, and the performance she delivered deserves to be celebrated loudly. Coming off the bench, Cunningham finished with 24 points on 8 of 11 shooting from the field and a staggering 6 of 7 from beyond the three-point arc. She shot over 90% from three-point range. Let that number settle in for a moment. In a professional basketball game against a defense that was actively trying to contain her, Sophie Cunningham was virtually automatic from deep. But here is the thing about Cunningham that the box score will never fully capture. It is not just the shooting. It is the way she plays the game. She plays with a massive chip on her shoulder and a fearless, infectious competitive energy that has spread throughout the entire Indiana locker room. She dives on the floor for loose balls without hesitation. She aggressively attacks the glass for offensive rebounds that role players typically don't pursue. She hits heavily contested three-pointers right in the face of closing defenders without flinching. Do you remember what she did against the Connecticut Sun just days before this game? Coming off the bench in a critical moment, she hit 3 consecutive bombs from deep and personally scored the final 11 points of that game to seal the victory. That clutch instinct did not disappear against Toronto. She showed up in exactly the same way, in exactly the moments her team needed her most. Her connection with Caitlin Clark is developing into something genuinely thrilling to watch. The two of them feed off each other's energy in a way that feels natural and unforced. When Clark drives and draws the defense, Cunningham relocates to the open corner and catches and fires without hesitation. When Cunningham gets hot and the defense shifts to contain her, Clark attacks the suddenly open driving lane. They are making each other better in real time, and the rest of the league should be paying very close attention. Cunningham is also providing something less tangible but equally important: veteran toughness that supports Clark against physical defenders. Teams have spent months trying to physically bully and pressure the Fever's star point guard. But Cunningham's presence and her aggressive, no-nonsense style of play has changed the dynamic around Clark. The Fever no longer feel like a team that can be intimidated or pushed around. When your second unit has a player capable of going for 24 points on 90% three-point shooting on any given night, your head coach can deploy her as an offensive hand grenade off the bench. Every team in this league now has to account for Sophie Cunningham in their defensive game planning, and that reality makes Indiana significantly more difficult to guard from top to bottom. From a Toronto perspective, this night was a systemic breakdown at nearly every level. Their defensive rotations were visibly exhausted by the middle of the second quarter, chasing Clark and Cunningham around screens on the perimeter while simultaneously trying to protect the paint from Boston and the rest of the Indiana frontcourt. They were gassed. They were demoralized. And the Fever showed absolutely zero mercy. The Indiana transition offense was a particular nightmare for the Tempo. The moment Toronto missed a shot, the ball was in Clark's hands and the Fever were in full sprint. They ran Toronto completely out of the gym in the open court, turning every missed shot or turnover into easy transition opportunities before the defense could even set. By the fourth quarter, the Tempo looked defeated, not just physically tired, but psychologically worn down by the relentless pace Indiana was forcing them to maintain. The Fever's pick-and-roll actions were unstoppable all night, and Toronto struggled to close out consistently on three-point shooters across every rotation. When a team surrenders 113 points in a regulation game, it is not simply a rough defensive evening. It is a complete and total breakdown of defensive structure, and the Tempo had no timeout, no adjustment, and no personnel combination that could slow the Fever down. Now here at WNBA Updates, we keep it completely honest, so let's acknowledge the one area where the Fever still have genuine work to do. Indiana committed 17 turnovers in this game, and the Tempo converted nearly every single one of them into points. 15 points off turnovers for Toronto. That is simply not sustainable when this team eventually faces the Minnesota Lynx or Las Vegas with Hamidou Diallo-level defenders who are going to capitalize on every single mistake. The Fever can paper over those turnovers with their offensive firepower right now, but against elite defensive teams later in the season, that sloppiness will be tested severely. This is the one critical area where Stephanie White's coaching staff needs to focus their attention in practice, because everything else about this team's game is trending in an extremely positive direction. Speaking of the head coach, give Stephanie White her flowers right now, because she has absolutely earned them. The media questioned her rotations. Analysts second-guessed her defensive schemes. Commentators wondered whether she had the right system to maximize the talent on her roster. She ignored every bit of it and stayed completely committed to her vision. The run-and-gun, up-tempo offensive system she designed fits Clark and Cunningham perfectly, and the results are now undeniable on film. The locker room atmosphere, which was publicly doubted and dissected just a few weeks ago, looks genuinely cohesive and joyful right now. You can see it in how players interact on the bench, how they celebrate each other's shots, and how they defend each other in post-game press conferences. That kind of authentic team culture cannot be manufactured or faked. It has to be built, and White has built it. The Indiana Fever are no longer a team that opposing coaches file away in the middle of their scouting reports. They are a priority concern, a genuine threat, and increasingly a championship contender that the rest of this league needs to take completely seriously. Defensive game planning against this roster is a nightmare with no clean solution. Contain Clark's scoring, and she drops double-digit assists while her teammates feast. Protect the passing lanes and play her straight up, and she pulls up from 30 feet and makes you pay. Somehow manage to contain the starting lineup, and Cunningham comes off the bench to hit back-to-back daggers and completely unravel everything you worked to build. The road to the WNBA championship could genuinely run through Indiana this season, and the entire league just received a very loud, very clear warning. Drop a comment below and let us know, how far do you believe this Fever team can go? Can anyone in the league slow down Caitlin Clark in the MVP race? This is WNBA Updates. Keep your eyes on the court, and we will see you in the next one.